So this realignment of Japanese foreign relations by Westerners, essentially, was certainly seen as a crisis for the Tokugawa. They had lost a great deal of face, and they now had to shore up their rule. What to do about these treaties? The Treaty of Kanagawa and the Treaty of Shimoda were very important, but one of the things they did was ensure that foreign diplomats would later arrive and would demand basically the conclusion of other treaties, more specific treaties, commercial agreements. Do we keep doing what we're doing? The Tokugawa asked themselves, continue to move down this path, or do we maybe reevaluate the situation? So what they decided to do was go for it. This is what a historian, great historian of this time period, of these, the opening of Japan, Mitani Hiroshi, one of whose pieces you have to read for today, this is, or for this week, this is what he called escape from impasse. Go for it. Just go all in, and the survival of your regime will, in a sense, depend on how well you handle this crisis. The person who led this process was Ii Naosuke. What happened was in 1858, it was clear in the, by 1858, it was clear in the Tokugawa government that they needed a unifying figure, a strong personality who could bring together the various personalities in the Council of Elders, somebody who was ruthless, who was fearless, who was committed to reestablishing Tokugawa authority. And the elders felt they found this person in Ii Naosuke, who was a major Fudai daimyo who achieved the position of Tairo, great elder. This was not a position that existed at all times. It was an extraordinary position to be created when it was felt that there was a special need for it. Earlier during the Tokugawa period, it had been created during some attempts at reform, which we'll talk about more next lecture when we talk about the domestic problems the Tokugawa faced, to kind of shepherd the country through these painful reforms. And I guess in this way it was used in a similar way, because the reforms that Ii Naosuke had to oversee were reforms in the foreign relations structure of the Tokugawa Bakufu. Basically the way that the Tokugawa interacted with the outside world. Ii Naosuke was a person who saw it as his duty to force the rest of the country to accept the authority of the Tokugawa in basically in fully integrating Japan into the new Western-dominated political order, and doing so as painlessly as possible. By 1858, when Ii became Tairo, Western diplomatic representatives in Japan, having taken up their seats, most of them in Shimoda, then later they moved to Edo. The Russians first started out in Hakodate, but their representatives had basically put together a set of treaties by 1858 which were aimed at formalizing some of the finer points of diplomatic, the establishment of diplomatic relations and the establishment of commerce with Japan. They were especially detailed in setting up these, trade, these parameters for trade, and they were incredibly divisive in Japanese politics. By 1858, the imperial court which had been more or less dozing throughout the entire Tokugawa period. I mean, that's rather uncharitable of me. They were certainly not dozing, but they never felt they were free to act. They had come out in opposition to signing these expanded treaties. They would not give permission to the Tokugawa to sign these treaties. This was seen as a real political crisis, and certainly it was unprecedented in the Tokugawa period that the imperial court would ignore them in this way. So what did Ii do? He said, to hell with the court, and he signed the treaties anyway. So he certainly did possibly diffuse a diplomatic and maybe even a military crisis with the West, who were expecting these treaties signed. But he did this at the expense of angering the imperial court, alienating some anti-Tokugawa samurai, or alienating some samurai because they felt that the Tokugawa were weak puppets of the Westerners. And he did a number of other things to try and shore up Tokugawa authority. He launched a series of purges, purging basically people who were against his policies from the Tokugawa bureaucracy, even killing some of them. But really, he was faced with an almost impossible task. These treaties, of course, became known as unequal treaties because they were. Japan lost tariff autonomy. They could not set the level of import duties for foreign goods coming to Japan, which of course helped foreign goods to flood into Japan and dominate many of the markets. It granted extraterritoriality to Westerners. More and more ports were opened for the use of Westerners. Eventually all ports would be open. And these treaties were wildly